Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. In this episode, we are concluding the Analytics Mentorship series. So I've got Gavin here, and Gavin, you've got some fantastic news.
Yes, so I've gotten a couple offers, actually accepted one week before last. So.
Awesome. Well, okay, you're downplaying it. So you've applied for over, 200 jobs?
That's correct, yeah.
How many interviews have you gone on?
Interviews probably 10 to 15. Some of those are, second interviews. Some of those are just first interviews, introductory phone calls. But
Phenomenal. And then how many offers did you get?
I got two official, and then I got one for a second interview that I turned down because I accepted the other position.
So you got 3 official offers?
Got maybe.
Wow. Okay.
2.5.
Okay, 2.5. All right, so that's huge. Like we have hit gold somehow in this process because you're literally the first person to go through this apprenticeship program.
Right.
So I'm learning just as much as you are.
Right.
Do you want to break down the offer that you got?
Well, I'll speak about the first one first because the first one I actually got before. I think I got it pretty quick. Like when we initially started talking about it, I got it within like a week and a half. I got the interview within like a week and a half of like starting the interview. Like I applied one week, got the interview the second week, went on the interview the last week, and then so in about a month I got the first offer. Mm-hmm. But obviously that kind of hit me kind of quick before I even started applying to a vast amount of companies and things like that. As I said, that was a great company. It was a little bit more of a hybrid format, letting you drive and stuff like that. So going towards the second offer that I accepted is going to be a lot of travel. I think I spoke to the COO of the company. So one thing that he appreciated was the fact that we had spoken to the CEO and CFO of our apprenticeship project program. Mm-hmm. And those types of conversations, working with Power BI, that experience. He said the company was pivoting to that. He wasn't that familiar, but when I told him, like we looked at average sales, average margin, total sales, total profit, those type of KPIs, he was very interested in that conversation. So that kind of helped me lead it from there. But I kind of fast forwarded because that was kind of my third interview at the company. Initially, a recruiter reached out to me. I had to pass that kind of preliminary conversation. How
did that recruiter find you? Did they ever say?
I think it was LinkedIn. Honestly, I'm pretty sure it was LinkedIn.
Okay.
So but I applied straight to the company through LinkedIn, but a recruiter reached out to me from there. So I guess it was filters to them.
Interesting. Yeah, because one thing that I've been encouraging the apprentices to do is to get, not only get more active on LinkedIn, but also to optimize your LinkedIn portfolio.
Right.
Because we're in the second cohort now, and I mean, already we're starting to see recruiters actively reaching out to my apprentices and my students, right, which is pretty shocking because some of the students have zero analytics experience, but they've already crafted that personal brand. Right. Which is I'm just surprised by that because I think of recruiters, I'm thinking of headhunters with like CFOs or CEOs. Mm-hmm. But it's happening now. Yeah.
It is. It's happening very quickly. I think first and foremost, and that's something we're going to do later on today, is you need to have a great profile picture, or at least a clear one, which mine is very blurry if anybody's seen it before. But I think the second thing, as we talked about, I know one of your previous podcasts, they talked about the AI and just the algorithms as they filter out keywords and everything going through your resume. So whatever your resume says, your LinkedIn profile needs to say. Obviously, you need to have your link to a
like a portfolio, like a Tableau,
or your portfolio and all that fun stuff. And then you just need to consistently update it depending on the skills and things that you have. Obviously, the LinkedIn certifications are good. The Greensboro College certifications are better. So, so that's one thing you want to stay up to date with.
Gotcha. All right. So, and I should have ran this by you before. Can we quantify the impact, like the overall either pay range or percentage increase that you've gotten from this what was your second offer?
Yeah, so it was 50. I think I did the math. It was just in salary. I think it was initially 52% more than what I was currently making.
Wow.
So
How do you feel about that?
It was great. I think the best thing about the program and our conversations, because there was a lot leading up to this, because the company that I ended up accepting the offer from was one of the later companies that I ended up applying to. Mm-hmm. I think for me it was a big confidence thing, kind of as we moved through the process, just going through the interview questions with you, and what I kind of use the work from home model, I guess, to my benefit as I'm kind of going through these interviews. So one thing that worked for me as we went through our conversation was to try to tell a story. So if I have my recruiter or my whoever's interviewing me up on one screen, I have my key talking points on the other screen, so I can kind of flow through the conversation however it's going.
All right, so that's really cool that you have a 50% increase in pay. Mm-hmm. But what I'm almost a little bit worried about with you is like, how has that hit you mentally? Like, are you feeling some imposter syndrome? Are you feeling anxiety or stress?
I think I feel somewhat prepared. It's going to be a new role, something I'm a little bit unfamiliar with, but kind of as I went through this process, I look at it as like kind of how I look at life. Like either I'm going to win or I'm going to fail in this. So I put a lot into, like, I know that I can do the task. I can learn to do the task. I mean, like, again, I didn't have any Power BI or Tableau knowledge before we kind of got into this, nor did I feel, again, I didn't have any necessary skills to do anything or get paid any more than I was currently getting paid at the time. So as we move through this, I have a little bit more confidence to not only succeed in the role, but to ask questions and do further learning outside of just the job.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like what I taught you, and this is actually has been my approach to teaching from day one, starting at Greensboro College 2 years ago, is I teach people how to go down internet rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. Like I've taught you how to go onto YouTube and start finding content that way. Right. Because I kind of give you like an overall like kind of map towards success, and then especially you and Leombe went way. Like I gave you a general direction, but then you kind of like took these detours all across, right, and started exploring other things.
Did
because you even for one of your portfolio pieces, you're interested in the North Carolina real estate market, right?
Correct. Yes.
So you went on to, was it a government website?
There's a couple government websites, a couple different websites to kind of fill that out. Yeah.
Right, and then you built a whole portfolio piece on that, which is essentially a conversational tool for you to show your skill set, but then also talk about, what you're interested in.
Exactly. And I mean, I had more fun putting that together because the data points were all over the place, different websites. I had to individually put some of those in. Like it took forever, but it was fun. Yeah. Like it just, it took me a couple hours, but. Well,
I mean, that's such a perfect way to think about how to approach your portfolio effectively, because it's like, have fun with it. Like this doesn't have to be drudgery all of the time.
Exactly.
And in fact, I would even take that further and say, if you're finding like what you're studying drudgery 90% of the time, you're in the wrong lane.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I tried to learn Python.
Okay.
I'm just not interested in Python. I'm not interested in coding in general. Like I can figure out how to like in Tableau, which is the actual way to they have like the underlying coding language is SQL. I can find someone else's SQL code and then reappropriate it for me to like build out an if-then statement. That's about as deep as I want to go as far as SQL. I'm much more interested in the business.
Right.
And then also just talking to executives or managers, presidents of companies about, okay, what are you struggling with? What's the data that underlies it? And then how can we start to use that to drive a decision forward?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes the interview process for an analyst role very interesting, because some analyst roles are very technical. So to your point, a lot of SQL and other coding, R, Python, all the fun stuff. And then there's some that is just maybe some just data visualization, those business intelligence roles. And then they just give you a list of problems and then tell you to solve it. And then for those interviews, they want you to kind of explain your own business acumen, how you solve problems in the past. A big thing that a lot of CEOs or whoever they're looking for is forecasting and trends. If you can speak to that, that's something they're very interested in. But I think any analytical role, it's good to speak to all those things, but some are more specific in, certain ways than some, others. So it just depends.
So I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper about the apprenticeship project.
Okay.
So I guess for those of you who are listening, Gavin went through the apprenticeship program that I've spun up with Greensboro College. And it's a 3-month program. In month one, you get run through a certification where I essentially give you that roadmap where you can start to go in the direction of learning analytics. And then in month 2, I bring the apprentices on to work with one of my clients. And I think that had probably a really big impact on you. And I'm curious, I know how I think it might have impacted you, but I'm curious to ask you and then maybe validate like my assumptions, either right or wrong.
Right. I mean, I think the first thing that was kind of fun about it was I actually got to go to the facility. So we got to go to the facility, we got to walk around, and then I got to be a part of the initial conversation. They get to tell me kind of what they had, what data points that they had. They told me what they're, told us what they were looking for, and what they were trying to see and everything like that. And then I also got to see you and your element as far as like, hey, here's some things that I've done for some previous companies in the past. Is this what you're looking for? Or let's take this a step further and we could also do this to help you. That was very good for us. And then we also had Hunter kind of help, the leading that whole project as we went through it. And it was very cool just to build out and see the trends. So we looked at the KPIs that we looked at were total sales, total profit, average margins, and total sales, something like that. I remember there were 4. And then just being
overall cost.
All costs, yeah.
Cost.
And then just being able to kind of run through those, it was a very cool conversation to have. And then when you see the size of their business, some of their vendors and then the companies that they work for, you understand this is a very important project for them. And one thing that I had to learn, I think me and Leombe had this problem when we were first doing it, as well as just my general thinking about kind of going into the analytics role. You don't have to know everything at one time, and especially during the first deadline. So one thing that we started to do was, hey, we're going to figure out a couple problems and we're going to turn in what they have, see what they say about it, see if we need to make any changes, any adjustments, and then take back, ask questions. There were certain data points missing. There were certain things within the data, or just certain questions about some of the terminology that was in the data that we didn't have. So we had to go back and ask those questions, or we couldn't give them a true idea of what was going on.
You're hitting on something that I wasn't actually thinking of when I was like, what is the impact for you? So what I introduced you to, which I think is really, really hard from an educational standpoint, is I introduced you to uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because usually when you take a class, the right answer is A, it's B, or it's C. And it's 100% that is the capital T truth. What you got out of this project is you got to see, all right, well, we're solving this problem and we're not quite sure that we're heading in the right direction. And that's okay. But what you're doing is you're taking an iterative approach.
Right. Because
we got basically the kernel of what they were trying to get at within that first iteration. But I don't want, and this is something I see all the time with analysts or data scientists, it's almost like they're mad scientists and they want to just like throw all of these crazy chemicals and stir it in this pot, and they spend 100 or 200 or 300 hours on this perfect project, and it's completely delusional because it's not in touch with the business or the management team. So having that proactive communication process, I think, is extremely valuable. So you got to see that in action, which is pretty cool. I didn't even initially building out the program, I didn't really see that as such a benefit, but it sounds like it is.
Yeah, everything that you told us in the beginning was very true, because as I said, if you remember, during the beginning, I know Leombe and I, past what we were actually doing on our weekly check-ins and touch bases, we were asking hey, should we know this? Should we do this? Should we do this? And you're like, hey, hold on. Let's do what we're doing right now. These may be some things that you need to know, or these are some things that you can do on the side, but don't stress yourself out trying to do everything at once. And then when we got to the project, that was pretty much what they were looking for. They didn't need all the complicated things. They needed it very basic. They gave us 4 things they were looking for, and they said, this is what we want. And then can you complete this task in a timely manner? And, it got done pretty efficiently.
See, that's what's so interesting, is that I think people often they conflate complexity with value, especially in this space. So it's like, if I'm doing all of this crazy coding and all this sophisticated analysis, it's like, well, sometimes a big win is very simple. So all we looked at in this project is the sales that were generated, the cost of projects occurred, and then that's the percentage of margin. So then we looked at aggregating all of that data, because there was it 16 or 20,000 different SKUs that we were looking at?
Over 20,000.
Yeah. So that simple, it's kindergarten kiddie pool math. Sales minus cost and what is left over is your profitability right there. So looking at that, and then seeing it in, well, number one, the data was, I mean, that was your first exposure to like really dirty data, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And now you get to understand why that happened, right? Because I mean, it started. Actually, it's still in that. I was about to say the company we worked with is their whole initiative for 2022 is digital transformation.
Right.
So they're building an app to automatically
getting iPads for like the line.
But I mean, they're literally having people on the line like write it down.
Yeah. Check
and then at the end of the day, someone takes that and then enters it into Excel. But I mean, that's a lot of companies. Like of course, that's not happening at like Facebook or Google or any of these like huge tech. Actually, it might be in some situations.
In some, yeah, because I mean, this company is transitioning to more of a tech savvy world. And then what was cool about this too, or just going through the project was, I remember going through and you were always saying Tableau is the most easiest to use. Tableau is the most easiest thing to use. So for one thing, for anybody that's listening, or just for us specifically, it's like most companies have Microsoft. Microsoft is easily integrated with Power BI, and this is what this company had. That was what I did not want to do the most. So it kind of forced you to do it, but it's a lot more easy to read, especially for in that brief experience, some of the older populations, because it looks more closer to Excel. I think Tableau looks a little bit more nuanced. Like, you can compare that to like a Fortnite or something like that. So it's a little bit more new. So although it's visually appealing, it's not something that they're familiar with. Gotcha. And then I remember when we were going through like the different data sets that we were doing for your business, financial data was one thing that me and Leon Bay both wanted to do more of. Right. And then that ERP data is what we got. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah. So. Well, and see, that's what's interesting, and it kind of gets back to a topic we talked about a lot is what skills is not static. They're going to change with time. And if what I've designed the curriculum to achieve is that you are going to have data visualization as like a knowledge base, whether it's Tableau or it's Power BI or it's ClickView or whatever. You understand how to take data. You also understand the nuance of like why it's dirty and the complexity around that. How to clean it up, how to visualize it, and then have that visualization dialed into a business.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I am interested. I'd be interested to see what it ends up looking like over 3 to 6 months from now. Obviously, out of the program right now, but it was a great first project for us to kind of go through because that's a high level company. They make, it's a multi-million-dollar company. So just to kind of see how they work and how they function, some of the things that they look for as they expand their business, like average margins and some of these other key factors were some of the things he was like, hey, do we need to, are we overcharging somebody? Do we need to raise the price on somebody? Right. Like these types of questions and decisions are made strictly based on what we're doing. That level of importance is, very valuable. So I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah. I think the project was a slam dunk. And by the way, we're actually continuing. The second cohort is going to build on top of the foundation that you and Leon Bay laid in that first. And I think that's so cool is that what I'm starting to take a step back and seeing like, what am I building as an entrepreneur? And I'm essentially building a scene. So it's like I have my consulting agency. So I've got a bunch of people who need help with analytics. I've also got the teaching. So I've got a bunch of people. I mean, I actually had a student call me on Sunday. And he was saying he just got his first job, right? Which is huge because he was an undergraduate getting broken into analytics. Within it was literally his first interview, so he got 100% batting rate there. But he was saying that he was talking about the capstone course, which is the exact same concept as your apprenticeship. And the hiring manager was like, "Sounds like you guys are doing a bunch of free labor." It's like this guy's like kind of interesting in his approach. But it's like.
That's what an internship is.
But that's what you're getting a ton of value because on one level it is free project work, but I'm using that as a conduit so that you can talk about how you've worked with executive teams, how you worked with data, how you've dealt with real dirty data. I mean that project I think gives you an opportunity to like really shine in an interview setting.
It does. I mean, as I said, those just being able to present, have those conversations. As I said, one of the key things that you even told me specifically to put in like the resume was help build out a ERP infrastructure, which sounds, more complicated, I guess, than what we actually got to do. Obviously, as you said, the project's still ongoing. And I can't, give enough credit to Hunter kind of directing us through that. Hunter was great, showing us how to do that. As he said, he staying up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning just to figure out a problem. Like, that's a level of dedication that you don't see from most people. So that was very cool too, working with them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap this up with the question of, if you were to meet someone tomorrow who's interested in applying for their first analytics job, what would be the advice that you would give them?
First thing, applying it, look at your current business, like your current business experience. And then I would try to apply to jobs within that industry first, because that's the easiest thing to speak to. Even if you have zero analytics experience other than this program, or just some basic coding that you may have done on, as I said, like your LinkedIn or anything like that, go towards, like I came from, we talked about coming from the healthcare industry. So those were some of the jobs that I got the most hits from. And then in those interviews, I can speak to it a lot, because although I was on the sales side, just knowing insurance can be a little bit more complex, I can at least speak to it a little bit better than the average. Now, once you go from there, what you want to do is, find the industries that you want to work in. You need to know that up top as well. And then find, like, what do you want out of a company? General development, is it all about pay, location, flexibility as far as being hybrid or remote? Look towards all those things and kind of figure those. I mean, we're in North Carolina. North Carolina right now is having a big boom within the financial space. So Charlotte is the number 2 banking capital in the U.S. is what they say. The Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh area is big in tech right now. So if I'm in this area, or if you want to come to this area, those would be the jobs that I would reach out to if you're interested in those areas. But there's a lot of jobs, and analytic jobs, especially the entry-level jobs, as long as you can speak to a general level of experience in maybe Excel. And then also mention the fact that you're constantly learning, speak towards those things. That would be what I would say to get you started.
Gotcha. So, okay. So one of the things I keep hearing over and over again is that people are getting discouraged very quickly.
Right.
And I think what you've done is shown what a numbers game it is.
Yes.
And I think that you've also, you crafted the strategy. I'm just going to be bringing it on to, like, the next students or all the people who are listening to the podcast of, how did you get to over 200 job applications?
So I did a lot of doing jobs that I didn't think I could get or anything like that. But what I'll tell anybody is, if you do the LinkedIn Easy Apply, depending on your level of experience, you may get a profile view or download, but you may not get a phone call, because those jobs are essentially like a cattle call, and you'll have a lot of people with above qualifications, your master's in data science or something like that, applying to those same positions. So although your resume may look good, it all may hit the keywords or something like that, you still may not be a strong applicant, even though the job responsibilities say that you are. So the first thing, though, I still apply to those. Let's be clear, still apply to those. But I applied to those, but LinkedIn was very big for me. I'm not necessarily a fan of, like, Indeed or ZipRecruiter. Nothing wrong with them. I just haven't found as much success on those. The current job that I'm at, I found on LinkedIn as well. So I go through LinkedIn. Obviously, I don't look towards the Easy Apply. I filter out with, whether that be pay or anything like that. But if you have LinkedIn Premium, I don't know if you have the free LinkedIn version, but if you have LinkedIn Premium, you can click on certain jobs, and then LinkedIn will tell you where you fall in the applicant pool. So it'll say, like, hey, these people have, like, let's say SQL or Python or whatever in this, these people have a master's degree or higher, above a master's degree in these jobs. So it kind of lets you know who you're fighting with. So
because I thought you told me that you did do the LinkedIn Quick Apply if you were in the top 5% of the candidate pool.
I didn't look at it that hard, to be honest, because the Quick Apply is so quick. So I'm just clicking away at that point.
Gotcha.
But when it came to actually doing the research of these companies, so outside of LinkedIn, I wanted to be more strategic. And then that's when we had a conversation. Now, mind you, this wasn't until 2-3 weeks after I had to retool my resume. I revamped my interview strategy. And this is when I started going towards companies that I actually wanted to work for, and then try to pinpoint their job responsibilities and things that I know that I could do. So that's when I started going more towards the healthcare, some of the financial space and stuff like that. Like, I'll Google, like, say, top 20 companies within, like, North Carolina, and then or best places to work in North Carolina, and then you go through those things, you go through the jobs that you may like, and then you just apply to each individual one. So although it sounds like a lot of job applications, it may be 20 for the same company. So I tried to spread myself across all those different things. And there was one specific company that I got a lot of feedback from. But that one of those same companies, I also knew that for certain positions, especially those higher paying positions, I needed to take a step further within my education, which I would have never known unless I would have kind of shot my shot and try to go after those and interviewed for some of those positions. Because to be clear, I interviewed for a lot of jobs that until I got in them, I was like, oh yeah, they are looking for something and a qualification that I don't have yet, or experience that I don't have yet. But it let me know that I need to do more so I can kind of fit these roles and get paid what I feel like I deserve to be paid.
It's funny because I talked to my undergraduates about this concept of they're essentially in the nest. They're like little baby birds. What you did is you kind of broke out of the nest and put yourself out in the world. So it's scary to do that. It's much easier to just like get cozy and just like hang out where it's well within your comfort zone. You got out of it, and for sure there were like some solid blocks of like, okay, this is not a viable option. But I like how you're framing up is like that's not a loss. That's just a lesson that you learned and feedback on. Okay, well if I do want this, then I am going to have to get a master's degree, or I'm going to have to develop this coding language skill set. Right. But also, too, something I've been telling a lot of my students lately is don't pre-sort yourself out of opportunities.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I just had an apprentice who had a recruiter reach out to her.
We had that conversation, too. And that was when I filtered. And I think that was when I started applying and got the offer that I ended up accepting.
Because there's something about the hiring process I feel like a lot of people don't know. And it's that the hiring managers don't get the final say in what's on the application sometimes. Sometimes they have to kick that up to HR, and then they slap a bunch of requirements that may or may not be true to form to what they're actually looking for.
Exactly.
So I think that's probably a pretty good point to land on. Like, you do not get if you don't ask.
Yeah, because as you were saying, like hiring managers, they're only going to know they're checking stuff off their box just to send it to somebody. So I guess, kind of to finish this point off is LinkedIn was very good because when I gave a lot of crap as far as the easy apply, but what I think the main point I want to kind of hit home is when I saw like my resume was viewed or my resume was downloaded, but then I had never gotten a phone call or an extra follow-up email from one of these companies, I knew that there was at least something in the resume that we put together that was worth them at least taking a second look at. Right. So that was the first step. So I'm like, we're doing something right. Second step was that there's obviously, you might go follow up and go back to that job, be like, all right, some of the keywords and key things that some of these other applicants have is a step further than I already have, more experience that I already have. So, hey, I'm doing something right, but I still need to get more experience. So I may not be ready for these positions. But as I said, or as you said, I didn't, after we had the conversation to, don't outsource, as I was starting to sort other jobs, like I'm not accepting below this is what I want, and then sending job application out from that. And as I said, I was getting some conversations, some looks and stuff like that, but mentally now, kind of moving forward, there's an extra certification that I'm working on even outside of analytics, but will lend me well towards some of my other previous experience, combining with what we did in this apprenticeship program will get me where I need to be. Because as I said, there were certain conversations that were had, keywords that were used that kept coming up in some of these interviews. And I was like, I don't have that, but I know now what I need to do. And I think just interviewing in itself was good. Because to be clear, the first interview that we went on, we talked about it. We were like, all right, we're going to apply on Monday. I applied to maybe 5 jobs on Monday. I got an interview by like that Thursday. And I had nothing really prepared. I hadn't, interviewed for another job even before that, butchered it. Like it was bad because it was new to the space. I didn't have key talking points or anything like that. And I was just a little bit all over the place. And though he wasn't really, he was just like someone in HR or something like that. But it was very clear that I was kind of bouncing around. And one thing in an interview that you can't expect is for them to ask you enough questions to help tell your story, tell your experience or anything like that. So as I said, I always have my key talking points before all the interviews. I try to 30 minutes of like complete silence, no headphones, no lo-fi beats or anything, to where I'm reading out my key talking points, reading out 20 interview questions or something like that out loud. I'll recite those at least probably 3 or 4 times before the interview, and then I'll take 10 minutes before, get my mind right, and then hop into it. So everything just flows within the conversation.
Yeah. I was about to say, I think you killed it in the interview setting. I think you probably did a really, really good job. Especially, well, you have a little bit of a superpower in that you have a sales background. I feel like a lot of people applying for more technical roles are a little bit less extrovert. Well, you're an introvert. It's something we learned about in one of the earlier episodes. But they're not as well versed in just having conversations and flowing and kind of like vibing, just human to human, which I think is a really big thing that you need to kind of get your head wrapped around to really nail your interview process.
Right. I think confidence in general is something that I'm consistently and currently working on. Just in these conversations, like the podcast had been very good for me doing these things.
You're famous.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but I did listen back to a couple of those podcasts. I was like, Jesus, especially the first one we did. I was like, this is rough because I don't like to be in front of the camera or anything like that. But it got me enough comfortable to kind of flow through a conversation, and I can flow even with the sales role. Like you flow within specific talking points. Right. But I this podcast has been one of the few situations like publicly to where people consume that I go in and I'm like, I don't know what he's gonna ask me.
But I mean, it's also like I am very much a provocateur by nature. Yeah. So I'm just going to like put you on the spot. Yeah. Put you in the hot seat is what I call it.
Exactly. And I mean, it was good interview prep, even though sometimes we weren't even talking about the job. So.
I see. I do push a little bit, but I do it in a very warm way. So I'm not like bullying you. I'm pushing you kind of as like a mentor character to get you out of your comfort zone. That's where all the growth happens.
Yeah. I think that was pretty cool here. And I remember one of the first things at the current place that I'm still working at, he was like, do you know you say something like that or stuff like that a lot during certain conversations? And I was like, I probably didn't even pay attention to it. And I mean, these are typical things you hear in sales, but I appreciate like the pointing it out. So it makes me cognizant of it. So it's pretty cool, as I said.
Yeah. It's just like verbal tics.
Yeah. Just general stuff like that. See, I did it again. So, now it's in my head. So.
Gotcha. Well, Gavin, congratulations. Like, I'm so proud that you've broken in the analytics space, and I'm excited to follow you on your journey as you get deeper into it. And thank you so much for tuning in. This has been quite an experiment. It seems like it's worked out well. I hope you've enjoyed watching Gavin grow, and I've hoped you've taken quite a few things from the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.